What's up, guys? Richard here, back with another episode of the Cosmic I Ching Oracle, the Cosmic Way. And here we are learning about the Cosmic Way through each of these hexagrams. And, you can, look up your particular hexagrams that apply to you in your Cosmic Human Design chart and get the cosmic meaning of them here, which is only found in this book. It gives you the broadest, widest possible meaning, the true meaning of these hexagrams. This is the definitive, version of the I Ching. Here we go with hexagram 28, the preponderance of the great. We have, what is that? Lake, lake over wind, actually. The judgment, the preponderance of the great. The ridgepole sags to the breaking point. It furthers one to have somewhere to go, success. Pictured here is the ridge pole. You can see, the yang lines in the middle there forming a kind of ridge pole that holds up a structure, being pressed by something weighty and seemingly insuperable to the point that is about to break apart. And this is a metaphor, like all things in teaching, either for a structure that is about to collapse or for a person's will to go on, which is in danger of being broken. The metaphor of the ridgepole, while potentially indicating many meanings, points mainly to the human will, both the will to go on after a crisis or the will to live. The main function of a person's will is to maintain and restore his well-being and harmony of the cosmos. Will is the name for the total consciousness of a person's psyche expressed as energy. How a person directs his will is the result of his conscious decision as to what he wants to follow. When this is clear, the will finds its direction. When a person decides to follow his innermost feelings of what is true and harmonious, the cosmic sphere of consciousness, he engages the helpful energies of the cosmos for everything that he does. When he consciously decides to follow the values of the collective ego, the demonic sphere of consciousness, he loses the cosmic help and protection and thereafter must depend on his own efforts and whatever support the collective ego may give him. At any time, though, he can redirect his will to returning into unity with the cosmos. It is a mistake to think that this decision depends on a person's will. In reality, the decision is made by his common sense, which is his feeling consciousness of what is correct and harmonious. Once his feeling consciousness is fully acknowledged and agreed to by the thinking mind, and inner yes, the psyche as a whole becomes harmonized behind the will. The will is then turned to discovering the untruths that have imprisoned his true self, and not, as is commonly thought, to following some path already and conveniently laid out by others. Whether the person lives fully and fulfills his destiny by giving expression to his uniqueness depends on this conscious choice to find and follow his inner truth. The image of the ridgepole sagging to the breaking point draws our attention to something that is undermining a person's will, threatening to collapse his personality. Receiving the hexagram informs him that this is a dangerous moment because the loss of will can be so great as to send a feeling message to all the body consciousness that it is time to terminate life. This is a message which the body obeys, as by creating a fatal health condition or by unconsciously engineering an accident, since will is the leading force in the total consciousness. Will is undermined by mistaken ideas coming from the individual ego and collective ego concerning the true nature of the cosmos and the human place in it. It is also undermined by doubts in the original goodness and completeness of human nature. The individual ego thus continuously steals the energy of will through instilling self-doubt, fears, and guilt in the person. Its activity never adds anything to his energy supply. It drives him to total exhaustion of will through the pressure it puts on him to act. So everybody out there saying, oh, well, you need an ego. We need an ego to get by. No, the ego is what's killing you, quite literally. Having somewhere to go refers to the necessity to also resist the driving pressures of the collective ego in the form of shoulds and musts, and to ask the sage for help. These shoulds and musts temporarily block the energy of will, causing the person to feel depressed. An example of how the musts and shoulds are developed at an early age is, you must love your mother. Such a command replaces the natural feelings of love with the ego feelings of duty and obligation, creating at the same time an inner resistance. The mother's feelings of duty towards the collective ego, likewise, cultivate her indifference to the true feelings of the child, inciting a rebellion in the child for having to show feelings at times when he does not feel them. This situation is replicated in all instances where a person is commanded to feel what he does not feel. The text to the image traditionally connected with this hexagram reads, "The superior man, when he stands alone, is unconcerned, and if he has to announce the world, he is undaunted." This statement affirms the cosmic view that the person who is true to himself renounces the way of the collective ego and goes on his way alone, rather than compromise his inner truth. In doing so, he remains connected with the cosmic whole and the helpers in the invisible world. Thus, he is never alone. The collective ego would tell us otherwise, that the superior man is willing to sacrifice his life in the name of moral duty, and that the person who follows his inner truth will wind up being alone and abandoned. It furthers one to have somewhere to go, counsels a person to direct his will to following his inner truth. To do this, he needs to seek help from the sage to identify the core doubt that causes him to take on false responsibilities and constantly overburden himself. It may be that he distrusts that help for all his needs is available from the cosmos. Such an idea comes from the collective ego, which says that humans are born into this life without help, and that their only sources of help are its institutions. Any institution, including the family, when it lends itself to serving the collective ego's purposes. Other doubts are, I don't deserve to be helped to live, etc. The despair described by this hexagram has its origin in the mistaken idea that a person is born into the world without help from the cosmos. Having this view, he may then have taken on the self-image of the responsible person, or the hero who saves the situations around him. Such a person may also see himself grandiosely as capable, like Atlas, of carrying the world and of managing its affairs. In the end, his will to live becomes exhausted because this is not what he's meant to do. Before he can rid himself of any of these self-images, however, he needs to address the fear of becoming guilty if he sheds them. And as we know, guilt is the reinstallation feature in the collective ego's conditioning program to keep the individual tied to its system. Guilt, the sage informs us, has no basis in the cosmic order. The I Ching shows us that the person in charge of affairs succeeds best when he recognizes his dependency on the cosmos for help, and when he is willing to ask for that help and develop a daily interdependence with the sage and the helpers. He needs also to understand and adapt to the way the sage and the helpers do things. This hexagram also refers to the person who, rather than relying on the sage and the helpers, places his reliance on the use of power, policies, and devices. While such means may bring desired results in the short run, the results come with a fate attached. The person who understands the cosmic principles of harmony, the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, knows that the true source of his protection and furtherance is the cosmos, when he is in harmony with his inner truth. Preponderance of the great is also a metaphor for the presumed importance of anything that is seen as higher or special, and therefore as over other things. Mostly it refers to the hierarchical values promoted by the collective ego, and to the ultimate collapse of that system of values. The collapse occurs, for example, when a person has put all his energies into accumulating money, power, fame, or position, or a highly regarded self-image, only to find that these things are empty of the satisfaction expected. By the way, that collapse is what we're witnessing now, this transformation. He needs to realize that by defining things as higher and lower, he is separated from his true nature in the cosmic whole, and thereby has deprived himself of the chi energy he needs for his life, as well as the help that would have come to him from the cosmos to fulfill his true destiny. The preponderance of the great is also a metaphor for the exaggerated importance humans have given to their large brain, the cerebral cortex, by seeing it as designed to govern the other parts of the brain and body. In this view, the brainstem is derided as the reptilian brain and regarded only as an embarrassing remnant of our animal nature. The importance of the brainstem, as the sage has made us aware, is that it connects a person's conscious mind with the feeling consciousness of the rest of the body. When the thinking mind puts itself over the rest of the body, the person is shut off from his connection with his inner truth, and therefore also from his connection with the cosmic whole. One of the harmful effects of this idea is that it has ruled out the existence of the invisible world and the helpers, leaving the person who holds this view to his own devices. Believing that he is responsible for making everything work invariably leads to stress, and when success does not come, the stress leads to hardness, indifference to others, from whom the person has become isolated, and a serious disturbance in his will to live. Also implied in the above idea that people are responsible to make everything work is the idea that there are no limits to what humans can do. Connected with it is the grandiose fantasy that humans can even overcome the physical laws of nature when they are encountered in fate. Thinking that fate has its origin in nature, people believe that they have to conquer it through fighting, as for example, in fighting illness, decay, or so-called natural disasters or acts of God. Line 1, to spread white rushes underneath, no blame. This line describes the person who is burdened like Atlas with the world on his shoulders and whose will to go on is ready to collapse. The line suggests that if he spreads white rushes on the ground, he may safely put his burden down on top of them. To spread white rushes is a metaphor for saying the inner no to carrying the burdens of the world, or of the state, the company, or the family, and thereby invoking the helper of transformation. No blame is saying that there is no blame in refusing to take on impossible burdens. The helper of transformation is always called into action when we say the inner no to mistaken ideas about our true place in the cosmos, that we are the center of the universe and therefore have the responsibility for everything that happens. For this inner no to be effective, the person needs to rid himself of all the heroic self-images that drive him to take on impossible tasks, such as the self-image of the one who does everything right, or the one who is indispensable for the well-being of the whole. The seeming virtue associated with such self-images hides their magnificence and the fact that they drive the person to undertake tasks that are beyond his capability and which exhaust his will. Ridding himself of them will bring him back to humility and connect him with the cosmic whole. It will also free the helper to do whatever is needed. Spells connected with this line are created by the following phrases. You have to do it all yourself. You are indispensable. You are responsible to take care of those who cannot help themselves. Life is for the heroes of this world. You can do the impossible. This line also refers to the fate a person has incurred through having adopted any of the mistaken ideas and self-images mentioned above. This fate cannot be overcome by fighting it, but it can be ended if he will rid himself of the mistaken idea and self-image that have caused it. This fate can come in the form of an illness, such as Alzheimer's disease. Remember, almost like all illnesses come through susceptibility created by our thoughts and beliefs, mistaken thoughts and beliefs. Line 2, a dry poplar sprouts at the root. Everything furthers. Here, the dry poplar is a metaphor for the large brain, the cerebral cortex that has dried out because it has been cut off from its connection with the brainstem. Through one or more spells that were put on the person's feelings, such as thinking is superior to feeling, thinking brings clarity, your feelings do not count, they cannot be trusted because they're only subjective, etc. Receiving this line can be confirming that a person has made connection to his brainstem by paying attention to his dreams, by meditating, or by asking for and following the guidance given by the sage. When this is the case, it is extremely fortunate for the situation. Such a person needs to say the inner no to others who would encourage him to dismiss such dreams or experiences, and meditation is unimportant. This line can also refer to a person who has lost his will to live due to the belief that he has no purpose in life. The sprouting at the root is a metaphor for an event that makes him feel his life may have a purpose after all. This line reassures him that the fact that he is alive gives his life purpose, and that he does not need a special purpose apart from this fact. Until now, he may have thought of purpose only in terms of his head, his forebrain activity, rather than in terms of his heart. The poplar, as a tree that draws large quantities of water, is a metaphor for the way the forebrain is meant to draw on the chi energy that comes from the heart. See Hexagram 48, the well, as a metaphor for the heart. This chi energy can flow from the heart only via the person's feelings, from his heart through the brainstem, then through the limbic system, and from there, if not blocked by spells, to his 2 frontal lobes. The heart can be reconnected with the forebrain through understanding and respecting the true function and importance of the other parts of the brain and his feelings. So this is giving us like a complete cosmic anatomy, so to say, of, you know, a complete true anatomy of the human body. You know, I think that would be something useful to map out at some point, and you know, get rid of all this fake anatomy that we've been taught, that is quite literally blocking synapses in our brains and blocking the connection from our heart to our mind, you know, and from our feelings, preventing us from receiving chi energy. This line also describes what happens when we, upon being confronted with a person who is totally under the domination of the ego, inwardly ask the sage that is in that person's presence to help him. The sage can then displace the ruling ego aspect in that person and connect him with his inner truth. Line 3, the ridgepole sags to the breaking point, misfortune. The subject of this line is the duress put on people by mistaken ideas of duties or rights. The ridgepole is a metaphor for a person's will to live. Even an unconscious loss of will is a message to the person's body that it is time to die, a message that deprives his body cells of chi energy. This is the misfortune indicated. Receiving this line can indicate that a person's chi energy has become exhausted due to a block put on the connection between his large brain and his brainstem by a mistaken idea of duty or right. The person can reverse this situation if he rids himself of the mistaken idea in question. It can be any of the ideas mentioned in line 1, or an idea that has to do with supposed rights, privileges, or ownership, which don't exist. The line can also refer to blocks that have been imposed upon a relationship, causing the bond between those involved, represented here by the ridgepole, to be loaded to the breaking point. The blocks come from complying with false duties and expectations that have been superimposed upon the relationship, and which have become expressed as rights, privileges, and ownership. The parties involved need to deprogram these mistaken ideas and recognize that every true relationship comes as a gift from the cosmos. Relationships cannot be taken for granted, demanded, or owned. We lose the relationship when we no longer recognize its gift nature. Line 4, the ridgepole is braced, good fortune. If there are ulterior motives, it is humiliating. The ridgepole is braced can be confirming that a person's will to go on has been supported because he or someone else has said the necessary inner no to a dominant self-image. If, however, the no has only been said to get free of his misery, and he then allows the same ego-driven habits to be reinstalled, the ulterior motive mentioned, this would cause the helpers to retreat and the problem to return. The will can also be braced by cooperating directly with the body consciousness, as in Reiki or acupuncture. The same warning applies that if the person only seeks to become free of his misery without removing its cause, which is a mistaken idea or belief, his return to his old habits will also create a return of the problem. The line can also be a warning a person who has been helped by the sage to deprogram a self-image, not to relax into careless self-confidence. He is also warned not to think that the problem has been sufficiently addressed. The reason for caution is that he has still not uncovered the deepest cause of the problem, which is his lack of self-worth. This lack is created by one or more false phrases or images which he has adopted in childhood. So long as the self-doubt remains, the person will continue to create ever new self-images to compensate for his presumed lack. With the help of the sage and the RTCM, the complex of phrases and images can be found and deprogrammed. The mention of ulterior motives refers to ways the ego seeks to undo what the sage and the helpers have achieved, as when a person allows the ego to conclude that the importance of the problem was overestimated, when he brags about the success achieved as if in being helped. He has a special connection with the cosmos, or when after being helped, he feels guilty because he thinks his former beliefs would not approve of the sage and the helpers. Guilt, as mentioned throughout the I Ching, is the main means by which the collective ego keeps control over the individual in order to prevent him from following his inner truth. Line 5. A withered poplar puts forth flowers. An older woman takes a husband, no blame. The withered poplar is the image of a partnership whose substance has withered away. Its brief flowering represents the virtuous image it shows to the public as it dies within. Another meaning of the line is the flowering of a person who has freed himself from an ego complex that caused his withering by projecting it onto someone else. This happens, for example, when a person turns the responsibility for his fate over to his partner, friend, teacher, or minister. The older woman in this circumstance is the one who takes on this responsibility. Such a person acts on the belief that it is his responsibility to take on others' burdens, and that doing so is free of blame. In fact, by this action, he takes on the fate of the person he is helping, because he has prevented the other from learning what the burden of his fate would teach him. Line 6, one must go through the water. It goes over one's head. Misfortune, no blame. This line, with its emphasis on the word must, states the collective ego's view of duty, that when duty requires it, one must sacrifice his life. As Wilhelm's commentary to this line puts it, there is no blame in giving up one's life that the good and the right may prevail. This view upholds the feudal tradition that it is a person's duty, when the values of his group are threatened, to put his life on the line for those values. From the cosmic viewpoint, this idea is totally false, because life is a gift from the cosmos that is not meant to be squandered on the ego. Following such an idea places a person under great duress, because he is prevented from following his inner truth. Indeed, it may be that a person's inner truth may lead him to make such a sacrifice, but then it is based on needs prompted by the inner truth of the situation at the given moment. It does not come from a moral duty spelled out by someone outside himself. The person may receive this line to inform him that his will to live has been diminished through holding to the above ideas of duty. This line can also refer to someone who is going through the water due to two mistaken beliefs. One, that he is born into this life without help, and two, that he must do it all himself. When the latter idea is combined with the phrase, you are responsible for others and for the greater good, the burden becomes overwhelming in time, unless he recognizes that help is available from the invisible world. Failing to recognize this, an inner message is given to his body, which deprives it of the chi energy necessary to continue living. People who rigidly refuse to consider that there is help available outside the visible world must indeed go through the water. And in the I Ching, crossing the great water is a metaphor for, getting away from the collective ego and the ego of the parallel demonic sphere of consciousness reality. So I guess, like most people nowadays who don't believe that there's help available for them from the invisible world are indeed going through the water, but not necessarily crossing it. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening, watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.